Dr. Reid Christianson, University of Illinois since May of 2017 as a research assistant professor in the Department of Crop Sciences. He's worked both in Maryland on the Chesapeake Bay and also in Iowa in their work in the nutrient reduction strategy. In Maryland, he was on a team that designed and modeled urban stormwater science assessments in trying to deal with the nutrient runoff that they have in the Chesapeake Bay as well. He's a registered civil engineer in Illinois, Iowa, and Maryland. Please welcome Dr. Reid Christianson.
Yeah, I think it's going to be tough to follow these presentations this morning, but we won't keep you so long, obviously. All right, so I have the pleasure today to talk to you about conservation practice evaluation, and this is in context of the nutrient loss reduction strategy, and we're going to be talking also about NREC's participation in that process. Before I really get into it, though, I have to take this opportunity to talk more about the nutrient loss reduction strategy. It's something that's dear to my heart, and yeah, I spent a lot of time thinking about this. So it's a good thing you only gave me 15 minutes to talk, because we could have gone a while. When we're thinking about the nutrient strategy, we came up with that. We're a member state of the Hypoxia Task Force, and as part of that, we developed this strategy to figure out how we're going to reduce nitrogen and phosphorus losses from our state. And we've already heard quite a bit about that this morning. And as a component of our strategy, we want to track what we're doing on the ground. So we can monitor the water, but as we know, we have this annual variability, and we're looking at decadal trends with that kind of information. We can't compare a year like 2019 or 2020, like a little bit more rain than typical. Try to compare that to 2017, a little bit drier year, isn't easy to do when we're looking at our water and our water quality. But we sure can track that stuff on paper and say, hey, look, our level of effort has increased over this time period, and that's a parallel measure of how well we're doing and the progress we're making towards meeting those water quality goals. Okay, with any tracking effort, with any effort thinking about progress, we need to know, or we need to have data. Of course we need data. We always need more data, right? Everybody wants more information in order to base their decisions or try to make the right decisions maybe as we're moving forward. But we need data sources. We need to know where these conservation practices are being put in. We need to know when they're put in. We need to know how much, how many acres are being treated by these conservation practices. And of course, we also need to know what type of conservation practice we're looking at. There are lots of different things. NRCS has over hundreds of conservation practice codes that farmers are doing across the country. And all of those may or may not have an impact on water quality, but here in Illinois, we have our list. We have our list over here, reproduced from the initial strategy on the left, and we see a very unique range, or a pretty big range of the types of practices we have. We have cover crops. We have nutrient management practices that focus on both nitrogen and phosphorus. We have land use change, or changing from an annual cropping system to a perennial system, nitrification inhibitors, and we got conservation tillage and buffers on the list too. We've got lots of different practices on the list that we're actively tracking to measure our progress towards meeting our water quality goals. But you all might take a look at this list and say, well, that's not very big. Okay, well, if there are hundreds of NRCS practice codes, then why don't we have hundreds on our list here? And that's simply because we need a lot of information to really quantify the impact these practices have, and we simply don't have it. That said, we realize that this is a kind of a shortcoming of what we're doing here and how we're trying to track our progress. So a few years ago, we came up with, the science team associated with the nutrient loss reduction strategy, came up with this procedure to formally adopt new conservation practices into the strategy. And you all saw a need for this also, and we're like, okay, well, let's, all of the people on the science team, they're not experts in every single conservation practice, but you all might be. So let's open this up to accept proposals from groups around the state, or individuals even that are interested in submitting a proposal to have a new practice adopted. And this wasn't an easy lift. This is a pretty big deal, and I'm going to give you a flavor of what we were asking for in these proposals for adoption. So All right, so if anybody has tried to do even a little bit of a literature review, you hop on the internet and you do some internet searching on a particular topic and you gather some information and you kind of build a portfolio on what you're researching. Well, we were asking people that were submitting proposals for these practices to build a portfolio for sure, and it was a pretty heavy lift. So we were asking for a summary of nitrogen and phosphorus reductions associated with the practice that they were promoting. And this is a literature review. This is a really hard thing to do, especially considering we were adding criteria onto this literature review. We have to, not be looking at one storm in a year. We need to know how these practices are working over the entire year. Also, again, we have different weather years, and one practice in 1 year showing 50 pounds of reduction may not mean anything when you compare it to another year where it had 3 pounds of reduction. How do you compare that and add up and take advantage of that data? Well, if we relativize that, or if we include that as a percentage, then we can start to talk, maybe we can strip the weather stuff out or the site-specific nature and all those little details, strip that out a little bit. It maybe doesn't go away completely, but we can try to level the playing field by including the benefit as a percentage. We were also asking for a certainty component from these proposals. How certain are you that this practice actually works? All of the research point in the same direction and say, yeah, this is a great thing, or are the arrows pointing all the different directions? So having that low to high certainty component in there helps really, I guess, set the stage and actually helps the science team, as they're reviewing these, kind of cut to the chase and say, all right, we know we're probably going to adopt this practice, but now we're talking about what number we should put on that. Another component we asked for was the cost efficiency in dollars per acre per year, or dollars per pound per year. And this, not necessarily so much that we're going to use that in a decision to include a practice into the strategy or not, but when we are developing this strategy and we're looking at it holistically and how we're going to meet these goals in the state, we have to come up with scenarios. And when we do scenarios, you look for the low-hanging fruit, right? You look for the lowest cost practice first. Let's put that on the landscape, and then we'll move on to the next highest, or the next lowest cost practice. So this is just a way to kind of put this one practice in context or into alignment with some of the other practices we've already looked at. We can't do anything with information about how well a practice works and how certain we are with how well it works if we don't have some data source to track it. So the next piece we asked for is, how are we going to track this in our landscape? We need to have some data source available to us in order to say, all right, in 2020, this was the number. In 2021, we have this new number. In 2022, look, we've increased 10 more %, and we have this another new number to look at. So we're looking at this progress over time. The time element's critically important, and the data sets available to track these practices really has to be included. Otherwise, it's really pointless to try to invest and look at the other aspects of these conservation practices. And then the last piece on the list here, which really probably should be the first piece, is this is Illinois specific. We will look at and we take advantage of information developed all over the place, right? But maybe inferring something from a study done in Europe or looking at stuff done in California or even the Chesapeake Bay, they might be helpful to set the stage or to point in a direction, but they're not Illinois. If it's done here in Illinois, we know it works with our farming systems and our climate, and that should be the gold standard when we're talking about or looking at and reviewing data associated with conservation practices. Now, this was a big effort to review the proposals that came in. In fall of 2020, we received 5 proposals, which was way more than I expected that we'd see. But all the people on the screen here contributed, and I may have even forgotten a person or two. But if you look at that list, you probably see some of those folks sitting right next to you. These people are entrenched, I guess, in research going on around the state, and if they're here, they're probably incorporated or working with NREC in some way. Now, I noted we had 5 proposals. Again, I was thinking we would get 1 in the fall of 2020, but we got 5 from both NREC and Illinois Farm Bureau, and this was just a wonderful surprise to see all of these practices on the list. We ended up adopting 2 of them, so the science team thought that there was enough evidence to to really grab two of these and move them forward, and those were saturated buffers and terraces. The other three practices, blind inlets, grade stabilization structures, and water and sediment control basins, we know these are good practices. They've been implemented, and especially with water and sediment control basins, these are practices that get implemented across the state of Illinois very frequently and very well funded through the USDA. But just wasn't enough information to really draw a line in the sand and put a period at the end of that sentence saying this is how well they work for the annual numbers for the long term. Hopefully, through a lot of research being supported by NREC, we can start to answer these questions. And it doesn't take a whole lot of effort to open up NREC's annual report and say, hey, look at all of these practices that are being funded. Top of the list, water and sediment control basins. This is a great question to answer, and this is very pertinent research that's being done here in the state to try to answer some of these relevant questions that might further advance our efforts on the Illinois nutrient loss reduction strategy. And that's all I have for you today. So there you go. If you have any questions, you can contact me at reiddc@illinois.edu. Thanks.